Hello everybody and welcome to The Skull Gaming, and today I have a fun what-if scenario to discuss. What if Jason Voorhees wasn't Dead by Daylight? What would his powers be? What would his perks be? Who would the survivor be? Okay, that was a little too obvious, but still, the idea of a Friday the 13th chapter is definitely something to get excited for. I mean, right now we only have 4 out of the 5 Slash Street boys in the game. We're like Thanos without the final Infinity Stone. Fine, but incomplete. So then, let's indulge our curiosity and ask ourselves, what would Jason Voorhees be like in Dead by Daylight? And just throwing this out there, I am going to try to be as faithful to film Jason as possible when it comes to talking about Jason's powers and perks, which you would think goes without saying, but you'll understand as the video goes on. Now, before we begin, we should address the serial killer in the room. Trapper is clearly based on Jason, and many people use this as an example for why Jason isn't needed in Dead by Daylight, because he'd just be another trapper except without traps. Now, I don't want to be mean, but that is incredibly stupid. Trapper is an homage to Jason, that much is unmistakable, but he isn't a substitute for him given that their backstories and MOs are vastly different. Hell, I even made a perk build for Trapper to help him emulate Jason, so even their playstyle would be different. How, you may ask? Well, to determine that, we must first decide what version of Jason we are going to adapt into Dead by Daylight. You see, there are actually 2 different Jasons in the Friday the 13th series. There's pre-zombie Jason, the Jason that we see in parts 2, 3, 4, and the 2009 remake, and zombie Jason, which is the Jason that most people are typically familiar with. And you might think that there isn't much of a difference between the two of them, but you'd be surprised. But first, in how they are similar, both versions are far more durable than a human should be. Pre-Z Jason could take an axe and a machete to the head without dying, and zombie Jason just eats shotgun shells like nothing. But that's actually the only thing they have in common. You see, their tactics are also very different. As I mentioned in my first Jason Voorhees build video, Jason is a stealth killer, opting to stalk his victims and kill them when they least expect it. However, that's pre-zombie Jason. Zombo Jason, on the other hand, he doesn't give a fuck. Zombie Jason doesn't really try to be stealthy. Stealth just sort of works out for him, and if it doesn't, who gives a shit? He's a zombie with super strength. Unless he's going up against Sam and Dean Winchester, he has very little to worry about. Oh wait. This change in tactics is likely due to the fact that while pre-zombie Jason is durable, he isn't invincible. And he could still be hurt. Sure, he could tank an axe to the head, but that axe did knock him out until the start of the next film, so yeah. The next key difference is how they ultimately pursue the survivors. You know that meme of Jason walking towards a sprinting victim and still catching up to them somehow? This is where it was born. Zombie Jason doesn't run. At best, he walks fast and somehow still manages to find and kill his targets. Pre-zombie Jason, on the other hand, can actually run, and in fact, many of the original films and the 2009 remake showcase Jason sprinting after his victims, like a real human serial killer would do. So, with these things in mind, which version of Jason are we going to adapt? Well, even though my favorite film in the series is Part 6, which introduced Zombie Jason, I'm gonna have to go with pre-Zombie Jason on this one, for a couple of reasons. First, this is actually the more iconic design of Jason, with the second one probably being his look in Freddy vs. Jason. Whenever people want to mimic, parody, or homage him, they usually stick to a bald human being with a hockey mask. Hell, even the Friday the 13th game uses Jason's Part 3 design on the box cover. It's clearly the most iconic design. Secondly, I've always found that pre-Z Jason is a lot scarier than zombie Jason. Not just because the series kinda took a nosedive in suspense after Part 6, I mean, Part 6 is as much of a comedy as it is a horror movie, but also because Jason walking towards his victims doesn't invoke the same level of terror that pre-zombie Jason sprinting to his victims with a machete in hand does. And third, while zombie Jason is far stronger, I think there isn't a lot of unique gameplay potential that could be adapted from him since he really is just a walking brute that tanks anything thrown at him. Meanwhile, pre-zombie Jason, while weaker, still has enough durability to justify that with perks or game mechanics, while not completely ruling out other concepts such as stealth. Alrighty, now that we have our Jason, what should his abilities be? Well, first, I'm going to immediately rule out a power that most people expect him to have: teleportation. This will not, and in my opinion, should not be one of his powers. Why? Because it's not fucking canon. As I said before, Jason catching up to his victims while only walking and seemingly appearing here and there is a meme. A meme that's born from lazy writing and directing. The creators wanted Jason to be unpredictable, so they made it so that he sometimes appears here and there without explanation, and he's capable of catching up to his victims even though he is walking. But of course, not only do they overuse it to the point of absurdity, but when you really look back through the series, nobody ever actually mentions this as an ability he genuinely has. Not to mention, this is a slasher trope. Jason is not the only slasher in movies that does this. In fact, Michael Myers does this very thing in the original Halloween. And Laurie is fucking looking at him while he does it. I think Michael has a better case for having teleportation as a canonical ability than Jason does. Not to mention, if Jason did genuinely have this ability, then he sure could have used it here. Or here. Or here. Or here. And if you are dead set on this being a canonical ability, I should point out that this mostly applies to Zombie Jason. And since we're using pre-Zombie Jason, ha! Now let's begin building our Jason. Considering that Jason is the quintessential slasher, I actually agree with most people when they say that he would just be an M1 killer. But would that be such a bad thing? I personally don't think so. So, with that in mind, we will give him standard movement speed. And rather than giving him teleportation or fog travel and, making him a discount nurse or a discount spirit, our boy will not just be an M1 killer, he will be the M1 killer. For this, our boy, just like the old doctor, will have two abilities or modes to help him catch survivors. The first one will be Stalker Mode. This will be a stealth ability, not unlike that of other stealth killers, where Jason, by holding M2, can deactivate his terror radius and red light at will, allowing him to sneak up to survivors and jump scare them like God intended. However, unlike say Ghostface and Wraith, Jason cannot be brought out of his stealth by any means except when he enters chase or deactivates it himself. Also, unlike the Wraith, Jason will retain the same movement speed while activating and deactivating this ability, and also while in stealth mode. Thus, he will give no indication of when he is actually activating his power, i.e., there will be no sound or visual cues, so unless the survivor sees Jason deactivating his red light, they will have no idea when he is or isn't using stealth. And since I want my boy to be the most M1 killer that ever M1'd, activating stealth mode would count as losing chase, meaning that he can use play with your food to great effect. But if you want some level of limitation or balance to this mode, I don't know, have it last for 45 seconds and give it a max 10 to 15 second cooldown or some shit, I don't know. Now, let's move on to Hunter Mode. This will function somewhat like a mix between Myers and Oni's powers. While in chase, Jason will fill up a meter that we're going to call Killer's Instinct. So, the longer the chase, the more he's going to fill up his Killer's Instinct, and other actions, such as hitting survivors or breaking pallets, will also help in filling this meter. Keep in mind, filling the Killer's Instinct is a passive ability, meaning it simply occurs anytime that Jason is in chase or breaking pallets. Also, just like Oni, there will be no limit in how many times Jason can fill up his Killer's Instinct. Once it's full, Jason can press M2 to activate Hunter Mode, which, for all intents and purposes, will be an invincibility period, where he cannot be stunned by any means. Meaning that things like pallets, flashlights, and head-on will not affect him. Though, just like Oni, if he downs a survivor and then picks them up, that immediately ends Hunter Mode, so it's not like he'll be immune to Decisive Strike. Also, during this period, Jason will gain 5% movement speed. He'll be able to kick generators and pallets 10% faster, and he'll vault windows at the same speed as Tier 3 Myers. Now, for the sake of balancing this hypothetical idea, let's give Hunter Mode 2 limitations. First, it will only last a maximum of 45 to 60 seconds without add-ons. The second is that if Jason loses Chase, it will immediately end Hunter Mode, but it will not deplete it. It will simply remain at whichever point it was at, kind of like Legion's power. I also wanted to make it so that any dropped pallets automatically break when dropped on top of him in Hunter Mode. But I'm not that cruel, so let's just say that that's an ultra rare add-on or something. Now for the perks. And to be honest, I put more thought into making Jason's powers and abilities than I did about balancing out his perks. And I kinda wanted to skip them, but it would feel weird to showcase a hypothetical Jason Voorhees in Dead by Daylight and not talk about his perks. So, here goes nothing. Shrine to Mother. A shrine to the one that you love most. And a reminder of what you must continue to do. A survivor that cleanses a doll totem when you are at least 24 meters away will scream and receive the exposed status effect for 30 seconds. A survivor that cleanses a hex totem when you are at least 24 meters away will scream and receive the exposed status effect for 60 seconds. Hex Death Curse. The events that doomed you will now speak to the doom of others. After hitting a survivor, that survivor becomes unable to perform healing actions on other survivors or themselves for 60 seconds. Dying Breath. The voice in your head echoes your victim's inevitable fate. You become obsessed with one survivor. Whenever that survivor finishes a healing, cleansing, sabotaging, or repairing action, their aura is revealed to you for 6 seconds with a cooldown of 30 seconds. And that's it, as far as my hypothetical Jason in Dead by Daylight. For some closing thoughts. I know that Dead by Daylight will continue to persist and thrive even without the inclusion of one of cinema's most iconic slashers. I'm not trying to say that the game needs Jason, but at the same time it's hard not to feel a bit sad. It's like going to a party with some of your buddies, but your best friend can't make it. You can still have fun, but you're going to miss him. In truth, more so than a fun exercise in hypotheticals, this was a way for me, as a fan of the Friday the 13th franchise, to vent that melancholic feeling that I'm talking about. I grew up watching Friday the 13th, and it really sucks that one of my favorite franchises is doomed to remain inactive for the foreseeable future. But anywho, what do you guys think? Do you like my hypothetical Jason? What would change about him? Or better yet, what do you think Jason's powers and perks should be if he was ever added to Dead by Daylight? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below, and also be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy my content. As always, I've been Disco, and I'll see you guys next time.